There are four coaches in the NFL who are in danger of getting fired. These are guys who, if things do not go well for their team, they're out of a job. Now, in the sports world, when a coach is in danger of getting fired, we call that the hot seat. And obviously, all of the guys on this list are people who they're here because their team hasn't done good enough, right? Their team is underachieved. They're not winning enough games. And so these are four NFL head coaches on the hot seat. Coach number one is Arizona Cardinals head coach Cliff Kingsbury. Now, here's the truth. Last year was a disappointing year for Arizona. They were supposed to get better and improve, and they got some new talent and a young quarterback. And instead of getting better, they just went 8-8, which I guess was an improvement on a bad year, but not really the progress Arizona was looking for. Now, this year in Arizona, they have even more talent, more offensive weapons. They added A.J. Green, better players on defense. They added J.J. Watt, a couple of other people. And they still have one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL, Kyler Murray. So if Arizona is not in the mix competing for a playoff spot, they just have to be in the hunt, in my opinion. I don't know that Arizona has to make the playoffs in order for them to be like, yeah, we like our coach, we'll keep Cliff Kingsbury. But if they're not even in the mix or even close, then yeah, I think Cliff Kingsbury is going to get fired at the end of this year. And here's what's weird about Cliff Kingsbury. He used to be the head coach in college at Texas Tech. And in college as a head coach, he had a losing record. And I always looked at that and justified it by saying, well, like he's bad at recruiting and maybe, it's hard to recruit at Texas Tech and maybe it's not his strong suit. Maybe in the NFL, Cliff Kingsbury can focus solely on the X's and O's and becoming a good head coach and not have to worry about recruiting, and that'll make him even better. Here's the unfortunate reality, though, is that he struggled in college and now he struggled again in the NFL. He has a losing record as a head coach. He's never had a great year as a head coach. You're like, we're waiting and waiting and waiting. And I think he went 8-5 one time at Texas Tech. Like, that's his best year ever coaching as a head coach ever. And you're like, well, how did this guy go from college to the NFL? Losing record in college, once again has a losing record in the NFL. And so if things do not get better this year in Arizona, he's out of excuses. Like, he's clearly not going to keep his job in Arizona. And I believe that is the right move. Coach number two on the hot seat is Bears head coach Matt Nagy. Now, Matt Nagy, I don't hate this guy. He once won the NFL Coach of the Year award, actually. And in fact, for the last couple of years, I have been blaming all of the Bears' problems on their quarterback, I guess their former quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky, where I think Trubisky many times on film had opportunities downfield, had great throws open, and wouldn't pull the trigger or make an inaccurate throw or not see somebody open. I think there were many, many times where Matt Nagy made good play calls and his quarterback simply didn't execute. Now, it's kind of a chicken or the egg question. It's like, well, is it the coach's fault for not helping the quarterback get better, or is it the quarterback's fault for not capitalizing on opportunities? I don't know. Certainly what I know is that Trubisky is now gone, and therefore so are all of the excuses for Matt Nagy. He now has Andy Dalton at quarterback. He's got Justin Fields, a really, really talented young quarterback waiting in the wings. And in order to keep his job in Chicago, Matt Nagy has to show, hey, I was never the problem. It was always Mitchell Trubisky. I think it's very possible he keeps his job. But again, if the Bears don't perform well or look badly coached or very, all kinds of disarray and they're having penalties and missing assignments, that's still on the coach. And so with Trubisky out, the pressure, I think, actually is raised more than ever before on Matt Nagy. He's got to show, hey, I was never the problem, and our Bears team is going to take a step forward. And if they don't do that, if the Bears don't get better, Matt Nagy's going to lose his job. Coach number three, a guy who's in danger of losing his job, and it's kind of a surprise to me, but I've heard his name brought up a ton, is actually the Denver Broncos head coach, Vic Fangio. And he's in danger of losing his job, but I don't think it's entirely justified. Last year, for example, in Denver, many, many key players got hurt, like starter after starter after starter got hurt out for the year. And I don't know how that's the head coach's fault, blaming him for guys getting injured or having COVID, this and that. And then I would also point out, during his time in Denver, the Broncos have never had a really good starting quarterback. Like, Vic Fangio is a defensive guy. He's a defensive coach. And his roster is full of a ton of talent. He is a guy who many people even say that. Now, I mentioned Matt Nagy's Coach of the Year award. Many people say that he is actually the reason why Matt Nagy won the Coach of the Year, because before he was in Denver, he was in Chicago as a defensive coordinator and did a fantastic job with the Chicago Bears coaching their defense. So I think Vic Fangio is getting blamed for stuff that is not necessarily his fault. Tons of injuries, not having a quarterback. And I think if he can hold on to his job long enough to maybe get a guy like, maybe they trade for Aaron Rodgers next offseason, or maybe they draft somebody. I thought it was almost criminal they didn't draft Justin Fields, a decision that I don't know was entirely Vic Fangio's decision. I think the GM made that call, not the coach. He definitely got his guy, Patrick Surtain, the corner from Alabama. But I don't know, man. I just don't know that he's a bad coach. I think he might be more unlucky, a guy who's never had a quarterback, had tons of injuries, and Broncos fans will surely disagree with that. But I'm not ready to run Vic Fangio out of town. Fangio. I don't actually know how you say A or on. I don't know. But anyway, I think the guy has shown he's a good coach in the past with the Bears. I don't think everything that's gone wrong in Denver is his fault. And to see him take the blame seems a bit ridiculous. Now, the final coach who isn't potentially, I can't even talk. The final coach who's potentially in danger of losing his job is Zach Taylor, the Bengals head coach. He's been there for 2 years. He has a 6-25-1 record as an NFL head coach. 2 years ago, Andy Dalton was his quarterback. They went 2-14. They got the number 1 overall pick. Last year started really well. They had Joe Burrow playing awesome, and then Joe Burrow got hurt out for the year. And it's a bit cheap to blame a coach for having a bad year when your starting quarterback gets injured and messes up their knee. And then on top of that, the Bengals late in the year beat a really, really good Pittsburgh Steelers team. And they did it without Joe Burrow. They did it with a backup quarterback, and they beat a playoff team, Pittsburgh. So it's a mixed bag for Zach Taylor. 2 years ago, it seemed like they were tanking, trying to get the number 1 overall pick. Last year, Joe Burrow got hurt, so they had no quarterback. Now this is year 3 for Zach Taylor, and he has to show the world he can coach. Now, part of why Zach Taylor might lose his job is, to make room for Joe Brady. Joe Brady, remember, worked with Joe Burrow in college at LSU. He is currently the Carolina Panthers offensive coordinator, so they could fire Zach Taylor simply to make room so they could bring in Joe Brady as their new next head coach. But man, I really think that blaming Zach Taylor for the bad year last year seems very, very heartless and totally unfair. So I'm not a fan of, we'll see how the year goes. Maybe week 17, I'll be saying different stuff. But currently where I stand now, I look at Zach Taylor and I go, you've only won 6 games in 2 years. Like, it's time to show the world you can coach. And if you don't, unfortunately, Zach Taylor's going to lose his job.